Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And Mike.
and welcome back to this month's No Limits, the Scot Harvath podcast. How you doing this week, Mike?
I'm doing good because we are back on talking about Brad Thor. It's been a while. We've done what? Oath of Loyalty, Kyle Mills, quite a bit. We've done Jack Carr and True Believer, and now it's Brad Thor time.
Yep, and we've done a couple interviews in there. Got a couple more planned coming up. So it's actually been a while since we potted because we had the True Believer saved for a while, and we had some other pods I think saved as well. So our last last time I saw your beautiful face was the Kyle interview, and that was late September. So it's now October 19th. But excited to talk this book. Getting back to the Scott. We took a little bit of a break, but we're now back to one Scot Harvath book a month.
Yeah, and in case you're not aware, you can find all that content we just discussed over on season 1 of No Limits. That's the Mitch Rapp podcast, or No Limits, the Thriller podcast, which is our third feed. That's where we're covering the Jack Carr books and plenty of other things, including a really big interview coming up. So if you're not subscribed to both the Mitch Rapp podcast and No Limits Thriller podcast, go ahead and do that because we've got a big guest and possibly a special guest. Not going to say much more right now, coming up very soon. So check those feeds out. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for all things No Limits.
Yep.
So I got an idea to get us back in the Brad Thor mindset into the world of Scot Harvath.
Okay.
We're covering Takedown, and so before we do the usual stuff, can I humor you with a little bit of a quiz game? Can I put you on the spot here?
I love the quiz games.
I love when I do this, don't you?
Yes.
Here's why, though. There's fantastic writing in this book, and there's a whole lot going on with characters that we love, characters that define the Scot Harvath series. So I put those together and pulled a few quotes. And these quotes are describing 4 of the main characters, not only in this book, but characters we love throughout the whole series. And I wanted to see if you can fill in the blank. Audience at home, feel free to play along, try to fill in the blanks. We'll see, Chris, how you do filling in the blanks. So
okay.
I'll start you off with an easy one because, man, we've got an awesome debut in this book. Blank was a man who made his livelihood dealing in the art of duplicity and blackmail.
Would that be the Troll?
Ding, 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 ding. That is the Troll, dealing in the art of duplicity and blackmail.
Finally, I couldn't remember when we got the Troll, and it took till book 5 to have this integral character as we go. I'm really interested to talk to you about how we're introduced to the Troll.
Right.
And, we just did Rising Tiger, which the Troll was, he's evolved over time. So really excited to talk about that.
And his backstory, his upbringing, how he got to where he is.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, next one. Blank would make the right call, no matter how hard a decision it was. He always did. Who's in the hot seat needing to make the right calls for the country?
Oh, that was President Rutledge.
Yes, sir. They did 2 for 2 tonight.
I remember that was whatever the DOD secretary plan. He knew that Rutledge would make the right call.
They knew he would approve Operation Driftwood, which we still don't really know what it is.
No, we don't.
Halfway through this book, so. Yeah, and by the way, for anybody, we're only covering the first half of the book, part 1, chapters 1 through 50. And I don't know about you, Chris, but that's all I read through was chapters 1 through 50.
Same.
So, yeah.
Same. I stopped. I didn't want to stop because it's kind of it is a nice time to stop because it's a nice end to an action scene. But I just wanted to keep listening.
Right.
So
I feel like
I had to control myself.
It was at the precipice of we were about to start getting answers, I think, on a couple of things, or movement on a couple of things I really want to see progress. But yeah,
right.
This is a true part 1 and part 2 podcast because I'll be honest, I don't even remember much of the ending from here on out because I read this, when did it come out? 2006, 7? I think 2006. So
it's post 9/11, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's one thing I want to bring up. This is a book
2006.
This is a book. This is the age of terrorism, when a lot of thriller authors were really, knee deep into a post 9/11 world.
Yes.
All right, well, here's one more. Speaking of fighting against terrorism in a post 9/11 world. So we just toss the rule of law out the window? No, replied Blank. What I'm suggesting is that we stop believing that Western principles apply to our enemies. We can't win the war on terror playing by a set of rules our opponents refuse to recognize.
Is that Lawler?
Ding, ding, ding. Gary Lawler. 3 for 3 over here.
Boom, baby.
And finally, saved a tough one for last. At 36, his carefree days of unlimited cheeseburgers and beers were now behind him. At 5'10" and a muscular 175 pounds, Blank was in better shape than most men half his age.
That's an easy one. Harvath.
That's our boy. There it is. All right.
5'10".
You got
5'10". What does he have? Brown hair, blue eyes.
Yep. All right, you passed the quiz show 4 for 4. I was really happy to see all these characters. It's been a while reading it. And President Rutledge is on fire here. That speech he gives, we're going to have to get to that. Man, and thinking about, like we said, this book is a book for the age of terror. A president giving a speech, and Brad Thor gets to write that. A post-tragedy speech. Right. It's almost like speechwriters could analyze this. Like right now, we can have speechwriters in the White House who can analyze this text as if it were something, Bush gave, back in 2001, 2002, or whoever would have to give this after a national tragedy.
Yeah, and I think that this book, unlike any of the previous Brad Thor books, is his biggest answer to 9/11, or treatise or 9/11, like response to 9/11. Not only is it blatantly talked about in this novel, but also, obviously it takes place in Manhattan and references the attacks and how, we should have learned from all in the attack that happens in this book. He's able to reference all the mistakes that were taking place on that horrible day, and it's sort of like a reflection, while also I feel like he's trying to turn the page a little bit. Like both to reflect back on it, turn the page on it, and address. Obviously, we're in the heart of Brad's fundamental Islam. I don't want to call it vendetta. Like it's in the core of his ideology, the core of his books,
right? His early books,
and his early books, and then this is, I feel like, is his biggest response to 9/11.
You make me think. I wonder if it's cathartic almost for him getting this book out of the way. Yeah, is he saying, in his opinion, what needs to be said, so that he has kind of this freedom to move on to other storylines or other wisecracks? Because we've criticized the early Thor books for a few wisecracks that don't age well. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But at the same time, I think they did capture the attitudes, particularly of service members and the families of people who lost loved ones. So I don't want to criticize him for that, and I don't want to reopen that conversation, but I think we said our piece about it. We don't necessarily want low blows in our thrillers, and there's a few here, whether it's falafel jokes about a terrorist, or there's a couple of zingers back and forth. Bullet Bob and Scott, they're pretty funny together, but a couple of gay jokes, and I think it's stuff that doesn't age well. It reflects the attitudes of the time, and I think if you understand that, we can all move on, but not necessarily something we want in our modern day thrillers anymore. So
yeah,
leave it at that.
But I do want to, you kind of wrote it here, the Adventures of Scott and Bullet Bob. This book is really like that. And I don't know if we want to talk right now about the team that Bullet Bob is able to assemble. And that'll be the core sort of force, through the course of this novel, and how, it's set up. We're pretty quickly, there's a couple chapters, and then boom, we're in New York pretty much. Right. For the majority of the beginning of this novel, and probably till the end. I think I remember that. So,
right, because I was actually shocked in the first 10 chapters or so how many notes I was taking for the Traveling Heavy Scot Harvath travel guide. It's like, wait, I thought this book was attacks in New York, yet the opening scene is...
Right, he gets it out of the way like
Right.
very, very quickly, right? We go from
Marrakesh?
we start off in Marrakesh, and then we go to Somalia, and then the troll is in like Upper Scotland, right?
The Highlands, yep.
And
Montreal.
then Scott's
the
in
guy.
Montreal. Yep.
They bring him through upstate New York. They're traveling downstate. It's like, I think the president's in Wisconsin before he's shuttled
When he
back
goes
to
to
the
DC.
White House.
Yeah.
Like,
But
man, that's a lot of places all in a very short amount of chapters that almost kind of have nothing to do with the rest of the book because they're just setting the stage.
right. And then immediately we're in New York City.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about this. What did you think? Normally Normally Brad is very good at like capturing the essence of describing, the cities, and like one of the things we loved from whether it be Lions or whether it be, Germany in State of the Union. I felt like New York City was kind of lacking. I don't know. Maybe it's just like not that important, like to the whole story. So like it's sort of an afterthought, or like everyone knows what New York City is. So
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
If you didn't bring
You're
it up,
a New Yorker, so
I was going to say, if you didn't bring it up, I was going to. Yeah, I'm a New Yorker, and I spent plenty of time in Manhattan and driving Manhattan. And so what boggles my mind first and foremost, the amount of free movement where they're driving around the city, or emergency vehicles are getting through, or these SUVs are moving around. Dude, on a good day, you're not going anywhere fast in a vehicle. And this is definitely not a good day in Manhattan. Like, one lane on one bridge or tunnel closes down, and you've got gridlock for miles. And all of a sudden, every bridge and tunnel explodes, and like we're kind of just going about our day. So, I don't think I was transported there. And besides the devastation, the attacks, I also just didn't get the textures, the sights and sounds and smell of the city. I want a pretzel vendor just randomly on the side of the street. I want a hot dog, or just a bagel shop, or just something that they either make an appearance in or that describes the landscape of Manhattan. I mean, you can insert any city here. This could be an attack on Chicago, and the writing doesn't change all that much.
right.
I'm a little disappointed in that. I think that's the best way to put it. Is you write a scene in Manhattan that's clearly got a post 9/11 vibe. The city should be on edge. And is it cool when the bridge blows up and, the Secret Service motorcade with Goldilocks is involved and they got to move her and rush her and all this stuff? Yeah, the action is super cool. But you replace it with any bridge in any city. And Manhattan's not just another city. I should feel that way in the text.
I would agree with that. So I wanted to ask you, I guess we've sort of buried the lead here, but like the major plot point of the story, right, is Scott, after capturing this terrorist in Canada, heads to New York City for the 4th of July weekend to hang out with his buddy because he's not married, doesn't have a girlfriend, but wants to spend the holiday with somebody, and they're going to go on a drunken tirade. In the process of beginning their weekend of debauchery, this attack happens. So it starts with an attack in the 3 different boroughs, also in the backup counterterrorism center, like something in the Bronx and something in school, right? There's a school in Queens and
the school
something
hostage
in the Bronx
thing, which I think was a diversion to take all the emergency service personnel basically away from the city.
Yeah, and then they blow the bridges and tunnels, every single tunnel, which it's been done in a movie, a couple of different movies actually. And I meant to look it up, like, was this before or after this book? And all of this is because there is a prisoner in the city who is Eminem, right? So he's Osama bin Laden's bomb maker, and he was taken in Somalia a couple weeks back, and they brought him to New York City. Like, I guess we don't know why he was brought to New York City. Like,
Right.
we know that there's a secret plan between the president, the Secretary of Defense, and some higher up and some general, right? We don't quite understand why, of all places, he would be brought to New York City.
Although we do get the discussion that they don't want to choose one of the traditional black sites in another country,
Right.
and they talk about extraordinary rendition and why we can't really have that continuing because a lot of backlash in the media and also foreign governments no longer wanting to have that relationship with our intelligence services that they'll actually house the people in their borders. So there's a little bit of talk of that, but yeah, still kind of vague of why they're brought to Midtown Manhattan.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, so do you think it's because if all the bridges, I guess like if you're on the island, like, and it's the middle, but 4th of July, I've been to Manhattan 4th of July, and it's pretty empty.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So like if everyone's going out, and they even say that when the Goldilocks scenes, how it's easy for them to go in, but like the traffic on the way out is really bad.
Yeah, that's a
Like
good
going
point.
out to the Hamptons or whatever. So I'm wondering if, like, all right, they blow the bridges, Manhattan's already like pretty empty because people have already left for the weekend. Maybe that's why they're able to move around so quickly.
Yeah.
But either way, I agree with you that I wanted some more texture with
Yep.
like you're in this place, you're in this iconic place. Give me some descriptions, like you said, hot dog vendor.
Landmarks. Even landmarks.
So yeah, like finally we get to Central Park at
Right,
the
true.
in chapter 50, and the Central Park Zoo and that kind of stuff. But before that, we get the one reference to we get hospitals and we get
Right.
the bar they go to, right? The Whistling Pig, right? So
Yeah.
I wanted some more texture.
Yeah. And I think there's a bigger question here, especially the bringing the terrorists to New York stuff. And actually, that makes me think, I wonder if this is commentary on, though I think it might have been later. Remember there was a big discussion of if certain terrorist suspects and HVTs that we've captured should be on trial, and people had thought of New York City, putting them on actual civilian trials in New York City. And obviously it's just a ridiculous notion, but it was debated in the public arena for a little while. And I don't remember exactly what years that was going on, the talk of that, but it was a thing. So I wonder if this is commentary on that nonsense. Anyway,
Could be.
I think the bigger question is, do you like this play or this use of the mystery box of so many things are being set up as mysteries? And to me, who doesn't really remember the book all that much, I remember generally the attack on New York, but I'm kind of wondering this Driehaus figure, because we get some really good White House and Situation Room scenes here with the cabinet. And so Driehaus, he's Secretary of Homeland Security.
Homeland Security. Yeah.
He's definitely
technically Scott's boss.
He's technically Scott's boss, yet he's at odds with both Lawler and the president and a lot of the generals, including the Joint Chief, who, remember, they go at it over his Somalia comment, how, we're reluctant or hesitant to put any other boots on the ground because of what happened in Mogadishu. And the general, the Joint Chief, was in Mogadishu. And he's like, we'll do it again if we need to. What are you talking about? We're soft and won't go do that again. Of course we will, if the mission parameters call for it. So they're going at each other's throats. So it's like a mystery box. What's his role in this? Because he's definitely set up as the anti-hero or the anti-Lawler.
The bad politician.
Right. Well, he's going to claim we need to uphold the rule of law. That's who we are. We're no worse than the terrorists if we don't. Yeah, so he's the kind of, the other side of it, the, what do you call it? The devil's advocate in a sense. But then we get another mystery box of what's Operation Driftwood and who's really holding the terrorists, because
Scott, there's some fusion with that.
Right, he dropped off the guy they picked up in Montreal with what he thought was New York's joint counterterrorism, force.
JCTC, right?
Yes, the JTTC or something.
So
he thought he dropped in with them. And this guy, Mike Jaffe, who was wearing, the proper credentials and everything and had the jacket, that he was joint counterterrorism operations. But then turns out there is no Mike Jaffe. So It's really a DIA plan, a Defense Intelligence Agency plan, which is what I think Operation Driftwood was that the president approved. So did the president approve something where we're having this major fake out of we actually have Mohammed bin Mohammed and the other terrorist, but they're not with the right people? So did we basically use the city of Manhattan and the civilians as bait to draw out an attack, and we're secretly hiding the terrorists? And that was approved by the president, which sounds bizarre. And then how and why is the troll hiring Chechen guys to go location by location looking for the terrorist?
So right, and these locations that I think are connected to the NSA somehow.
The diamond shop?
Because they're paperless places. All they do are they have computers that crunch numbers, crunch data. And we get that one scene from the NSA who mentions that, these two places are offline. But these locations are completely batted down with people in like either plainclothes or Marines, and it's a diamond shop that has like 3 Marines guarding it. Or it's like a fake office building.
A shell company.
Every single worker has, a weapon,
Right.
I imagine like, you walking in and you seeing like this, they mentioned like the one lady who's smoking as a secretary and she pulls out her Glock.
Yeah. What are these sites?
Yeah. What are these sites? We still haven't figured that out. And obviously we cut to the interrogation scenes with, Mohammed, what's his name? Eminem, Mohammed.
Well, there's Mohammed bin Mohammed. And then I think there's
his cousin, or his
exactly.
nephew, Jamal. Yeah. So there's that going on with, they still keep calling him Mike Jaffe, whatever his name is.
And maybe he is, but he definitely works for DIA and not the Joint Terrorism Force.
DIA, NSA, yeah.
He misled Scott and Gary.
I'm just wondering what's the reasoning for not letting people in on it,
It's got to be leading up to some big reveals, right? Because I feel in the dark about it. And actually, I was going to have some negative reviews of this first half. I had to read it a second time. After I just read it, I literally had to go back and read it again. And then I finally got like who's who and who's sketchy. But the first time I was just a little confused because too many mysteries were going on all at once.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. There's the mystery, and Scott's the one trying to figure out all of them, right? And somehow they're all going to connect in the end.
Yep. But they're running on loose ends. Like Scott and Gary really have nothing. They're calling each other back and forth like, we have nothing else, so look into this thing. And then, Lawler puts pressure on the FBI. Oh, here's another angle, dude. Martin Source, Director Source of the FBI.
Right, and he's involved with it somehow too, right?
He has his guys lie to Gary Lawler and try to cover up whatever's going on with DIA, the Defense Intelligence.
Right.
Like, so the FBI's in this, and it goes to the top. We know Driehaus is being set up as this Homeland Security director who actually maybe doesn't agree with the president's methods on Homeland Security. Who's the big bad here? And secretly the troll running these Chechen hit teams, which are causing the destruction. What is going on?
Well, in concert with Abdul Ali, right? Who is the assassin hired by Al Qaeda to get back Mohammed bin Mohammed.
Yeah, the troll's just essentially the contractor.
There's another aspect to this. There's another mystery box because the troll has one of the Chechens on his side secretly, like, pumping him data from the site. So, like,
yes,
and it's like, why does he want this data? Because we don't quite know what this data is. So there's a lot of mysteries being set up that hopefully will get fully explained by the end of the novel.
Yeah, I think they have to. I got halfway through the book and I was wondering if I wanted a little bit. I wanted a peek behind the curtain a little more at what's going on. I think the clues are there. Like when I read it that second time, I picked up on a lot more of them, but it's a rather complex book. And we've noticed on the last few thrillers we read, particularly new releases, they don't have that complexity. And
no, they don't. I miss this complexity.
I was talking with an industry insider, and he definitely said the trend is shorter books, less words, more editing getting cut on, and left on the cutting room floor. And I see that as a negative. I know the publishing industries want to sell to shorter attention spans and a younger audience, and it's all about moving books and the bottom line. But unfortunately, a few new releases, including Rising Tiger in the Brad Thor series, it didn't have the meat, the complexity, and the detail I wanted. So reading these earlier books, I'm enjoying that. They are heavier, meatier, longer. I'm getting a little lost in this one, but I think the payoff will be there. So I don't know if I like this trend, because going back to some of these older books, there's a lot more to chew on in them. You don't just rip through them in a few sittings and go, oh, that was a cool story. You have to actually stop and think, what's going on here?
Very true. Very true. Do you want to talk a little bit about the action?
Yeah, there's a lot of... There's just one more person I want to bring up, because we've kind of done the whole cast of characters, right? And the only other one is a quick phone call Scott has to Kevin McAuliffe at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency.
He's from what book? Is that State of the Union? No. The last one. He was in the last one.
He was in Blowback? I was trying to think. Was this the guy he called who was like running marathons or something? Who was also
and he gets him the satellite imagery in the Alps.
Exactly.
Right.
And here he's tracking down digital phones and seeing what towers
digital phones. Yeah.
Because it seems the terrorists have some sort of network where one central authority, the head terrorist, if you will, can monitor, control, and there's a pager, right, of where the different cell towers are with the different teams, so they can coordinate. And Scott even says, oh, I know why you have those watches. They're not detonator watches like I've seen throughout the Middle East. They're coordination watches, so the attack can happen at the same time. So,
right.
I wanted to mention the techie end of things because of one minor gripe here that I'm curious if you picked up on as well. He sounded an awful lot like Marcus Demand, calling a tech guy in, just to do the tech and give you answers. You need answers, call Marcus. And George Goodell reading this book, I hate to say it, it was a bit of a turnoff. I just, when we read Scot Harvath books narrated by George Goodell, I'm just like, oh, call Marcus. Or I'm thinking like, bring in Scott Coleman. And unfortunately, it's getting me confused. And then all of that came to a head when Kevin McAuliffe, though I'm
sounded like Marcus.
No, I'm thinking of him as Marcus, but no, not at all. He sounds exactly like Scott Coleman. Exactly.
Yes.
And I was so thrown off because I'm like, wait a minute, that's Scott Coleman. And I was like, oh no. And in my mind, I just couldn't reconcile it. So one of the few times I'm going to say it might be a negative on my score that I'm listening to this book read by George Goodell.
Yeah, I want to know when we get Armin Schultz, because he takes over and reads all of them. So
has he done any of them yet in the ones we've reread, like the first 5?
I don't think so.
No.
So George has done a couple of them. Oh no, he might have did Lions. Let me pull it up.
Oh, while we're on it, one other problem with the audio narration. I don't know how I felt about the troll.
Oh, and then the troll's voice.
Yeah.
So Armin Schultz gets troll's voice perfectly.
Perfect.
Yeah, that really took me out of it.
I don't know if George's troll voice is doing it for me, so tweet at us if you disagree that you really enjoyed George's troll. # George the Troll. And feel free to disagree with these two clowns over here.
Armin Schultz did Lions.
He did Lions. Okay.
Yeah.
I think Lions stands out as my favorite book in the series, and him reading it might be a big part of that, So
Armin Schultz also did Path of the Assassin. So he did those two.
Okay.
And then it's with State of the Union. It's State of the Union, Blowback, and Takedown is George Goodell.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I think you're right to move on to the action. That is really the who's who cast of characters I wanted to set the stage with, lay the framework.
Yeah, so we get quite a bit of action. I mean, not only to start out with the attacks, there's some really cool like scenes with Goldilocks and the Secret Service where she, obviously the initial scene when at first, again, a mystery. We're reading the chapter, and he makes it seem like they're these parents,
right?
Driving their kids in for a night. And there's this one little line that when I read it the first time, I was like, oh, that's a weird line. Like it's like Martha and
Tim and Marcy,
Tim and Marcy were used to being ignored, and I was like, well, that's awful. These kids are awful.
Yeah.
Like,
and they're going.
But now
clubbing?
It makes sense.
You're driving them to go clubbing, and they're that rude to you.
Yeah, you're driving them to go shopping on like Fifth Avenue and then
Fucking
to go
brats.
clubbing. Yeah. I was like, who the fuck are these kids? Like, but then it made sense. Like, obviously they're their, protective detail. It was pretty gruesome that he has like, Brad has her two friends get like severely impaled.
Oh yeah.
And obviously Amanda is okay. Again, Amanda can't stay out of the way. She's the one who Scott has to save in Lions, right? In the snow.
Right. Very iconic scene right there.
Oh yeah, that's that all time.
Might be Brad's best, to be honest. When Scott's in that cave with Goldilocks, oh my god,
and saves her life.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that was awesome. What else? What are some other action?
There's some random action, right? Like the hits on the diamond place with the Chechens and whatnot.
Yes,
but they just seem like one-offs. So, it's leading somewhere. But right now, I'm not super invested in how many Marine guards they kill or how many offices they shoot up, and I kind of wanted to move to the next thing. But I guess that gave me a little action.
And I guess the biggest one so far in this first half is the ambush that they try to coordinate in Central Park.
Oh, dude, and the horse. That's right.
Which ends up going really badly because they get stopped by the mounted police and get told to put. I thought that was interesting that he said Timothy McVeigh was stopped and was he let go because they were looking for like a Muslim instead of looking for a white person.
Right. Yeah, that was an interesting detail. And these NYPD cops didn't want to
do that all over again
and let Scott and guys go, thinking they're suspicious and that they might have fake credentials. Yeah. Oh man, when he takes that horse, dude. So yeah, the Central Park stakeout scene of McAuliffe gave them imagery of these two SUVs going around, black SUVs. And so that's one clue. And later on, they see those towards the end of the chase. But to draw them out, they use the cell phone that they got off one of the terrorists, and they set up a fake meeting place so they can draw out his boss. And obviously, his boss is going to come to kill him because he wants to tie up loose ends. Because this is a terrorist whose bomb didn't explode properly. And so he's not supposed to be alive. He was a suicide bomber. Bomb didn't go off. And basically his jihad, supervisor wants to take him out because he's a loose end. So he meets him in Central Park, and that's when Scott. Oh, who's the lady in their group? There's some lady they used in the sting operation. She's been pretty badass.
There's 3 people that Bob is in this PTSD therapy group, right?
Yeah.
And 2 of them there's Morgan Cates and the chick. What's her name?
And she's the EOD specialist.
That's right. She's an EOD specialist. She only has one good eye because it got messed up. She keeps catching Scott staring at her.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But Scott takes the horse off one of the cops who get the Mounties who gets shot. He's taking that thing across Central Park, and then he goes down a street following the SUVs, and he shoots one of them out. Right, shoots the back of it out. They shoot at him. His horse goes down, and they're like on some random like street, Manhattan, and the horse dies. And that was vicious. Like I thought that whole chase was. You're right. Besides the bridge blowing up with the Secret Service detail, that's definitely the best action scene of the first half.
Yeah, I think so too. Some other cool moments where, like, when they're on the roof, they see the RPG come out and take out the helicopter. That was one of like one of the real times where I felt a scene where like you're placed in the city and you just get this sense of dread, right?
Yes.
Everyone's watching the TVs. shit's going crazy. Let's go up to the roof, get a picture. They see like plumes of smoke all over. They see a helicopter, sort of going to help, and then next thing you know, that helicopter goes down. Like shit, something is up. That was pretty intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, some really good action. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting some more
and getting some answers of what's going on here. Yeah.
Yes.
So there's another, and maybe it's the last kind of through line or storyline in this half. We touched on it briefly, but I'm really digging and getting Vince Flynn vibes from all the White House scenes.
Yes, the president room, is intense.
Yeah,
the
speech. Oval Office, his speech. Yeah, so what do you think about, because I don't think of all that as a hallmark of the Scot Harvath series.
It's way more Vince style. And like hearing George, talk in Rutledge's voice, it sounded like either an Alexander or a Stevens,
yes.
Yeah. I was getting that vibe of early Vince Flynn presidential meeting rooms. Yeah, because the first book, the president was captured, and then we really haven't had the president being that much involved in any story. I guess a little bit in State of the Union, but like it's mainly like Gary and some of the higher ups at the agencies, not quite the president.
Right. And I really like it. I'm wondering if some of the other books could have had more of it, or if would I have liked Path of the Assassin or Blowback more if it had the whole cabinet assembly scenes written as good as this one? Because I feel like in the other books so far, they haven't been this good.
No, I would agree with that.
I mean, just listen to this. Here's a quote from Rutledge, and this is maybe the second or third time we've had these kind of rule of law, fighting the war of terrorism, these almost constitutional debates over how should America act? What does leadership look like to maintain the moral high ground in a fight versus enemies who don't even speak the same language of morality and good and evil that you do? I feel like Brad is finally tackling that head on instead of just making wisecracks about it or assuming the reader has the same political philosophy as him. He's giving it thought time and dialogue that I don't think he's really dug into yet. And it's come up, it's been reoccurring. It's not just one chapter where it's discussed. Different policies on how to fight the war on terrorism came up over and over as a theme of this book. So I think he's really working through things here. And this is one of the quotes. Quote, "Quietly, Rutledge questioned why winning the war on terror and winning the war with the media seemed to be mutually exclusive. How many more September 11ths had to happen before the American people realized what a savage enemy they were facing? It was one of the most trying challenges of his administration. But the president knew that however unpopular his choices might be, he had to put the welfare of the country and its citizens first, even if many of them couldn't stomach what had to be done." And that's Brad Thor right there, right?
Yeah, I think I like the maturity of, whether or not you agree with Brad's thinking or not. I'd much rather read his outward expression. Again, this idea of response to 9/11, I feel like it's way more thought out and being addressed through the scenes with Rutledge in the White House, as opposed to some of the like you said, the wisecracks or the like sort of off-color comments that we've gotten in previous books.
Right.
Which again, we've seen him age well out of this. He's now like a different writer, has different ideologies. Again, it's like a sign of the times. This book is, 2005 again. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed these White House scenes. I thought they were very good, and they definitely elevate the book for me.
Yep. And then it goes in line with Brad Thor's bread and butter, which is his real world connections. He's a student of geopolitics. He's the professor. Yeah, that's what we're going to call him, Professor Thor. And one of the many ways we see that here is, like you mentioned, the Timothy McVeigh bombings. He's highlighting that to inform the choices characters are making here. And another time that happens is the discussion with, I believe it's Bullet Bob and Scott, about crossing the border from Canada, and how that really is a hotspot for terrorist activity and criminal activity coming into the U.S., but everyone's focused on and screaming about the southern border or the ports, and worried about things coming in that way. And I'm just thinking, what did you think of when the Royal Mountie at the border was actually one of our guys or one of our friendlies on the other side, and the terrorist in the car is like, "Oh, these Americans will cower as soon as I ask for a lawyer. As soon as I talk about my rights, they'll play into my hands because they'll have to let me go because I know how America works." And then they pull up and they secretly put a plant on the border who's just going to let them stroll through. I thought that was brilliant.
There's some interesting ideas that Brad has, and I never understood why people were so hell-bent on like building this wall when just having a physical wall, like they've run the numbers and like how much it actually prevents people from getting across is, it can be minuscule compared to how people, illegally traffic either through the sea, through the air, and again, coming from the north or coming from other countries, so.
Right.
It's Canada. People are safe. I also like the comment on Montreal and this idea of how, if you want to go to Europe, you can just travel like, it's like 40 miles from the New York border. Montreal is like at the very top. So,
and very European, very French, in its architecture and whatnot. So yeah, of course, Brad, he's the travel master. So
he is.
You can go to Brad for both how to travel, but also how to sneak a terrorist across the border. He can answer both of those, and he's got ideas. So
I wanted to like what. So the whole point of the Mountie was just to have this guy think that he was going to be safe, but then he's not safe, like, or just to have like this semblance of
I think
border crossing.
He was also the contact to let them through. Like he could go to the border guards and basically pull rank and say, "I'm with so and so intelligence agency, and secret operation. I got to let these guys through." So
right.
He was able to just pull rank to make it happen. And they even mentioned how some in the Canadian services will do that.
Don't agree with the policy. Yeah.
Right. They'll believe in the same things guys like Gary Lawler believe in and work with them. But then other ones will toe the party line and, basically go against our interests because they have their own. So I think it was put there to say, we've got people who think like we do, understand where we're at, and are willing to cooperate in other neighboring services. So,
right.
Man, not much more to this half. Anything in the first half that you wanted to get into?
Yeah, we talked about the troll. We talked about Scott and Willow Bob's friends.
Well, I guess the troll. We said we'd talk about his backstory, and
yeah, I guess we can go a little bit more into him.
Yeah. So, what do you think about where the troll is at, getting his backstory and his introduction? Because we know what he'll become, but how do you feel about who he is right now?
He's definitely in his devious phase, his lawless phase. We know that he's going to come to the good side or whatever, Scott, whatever agreement he has with Scott in the future. I think the second half is really going to set up the troll to become Scott's main villain or adversary in the next couple books, which is interesting to think about. I'm glad you picked up I hated the voice of George Waddell doing the troll.
Yeah.
He's such an interesting character. Like this guy who was, his parents hated him, so they didn't even put him up for adoption. They like gave him to a brothel, and then he comes from, nothing to now running this crazy allowing this operation to run smoothly. He lives in this exquisite house, buys all this exquisite food. He loves food. I remember there's in every book that he's in, there's a scene of him cooking or eating.
It's a Kobe steak here, I think.
Right,
Kobe steak for the dogs. Yeah, for the dogs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So he's just probably, besides Scott, he's definitely Brad's best character that he's ever come up with.
Yeah, I definitely think
and probably
so.
one of the best characters that any thriller author has come up with.
Yeah. I think he's one of those special creations that once you write someone like him, and then you write him again, and then he's in a bunch of books, I just kind of feel like you go, yeah, that's a character made for a thriller. Like, made for it.
Right.
So yeah, I would say that's one of Brad's biggest accomplishments is creating the troll and what he does, his arc, right? I don't remember. I'm trying to think, like, obviously here he's, you said in his dirty phase, he's an intelligence whiz with tons of tools and contacts at his disposal, and he'll basically take the contract from the highest bidder. So that's a dark phase the troll is in and stays in for a while. I don't remember his turn. I for the life of me, I just thinking later in the series, I'm going to be very excited to watch him be brought in. I can't nail down a moment or a book where I specifically remember. There is something big, right? There's got to be. Or is it more of a slow
I think
turning?
I think it's something big, and I think it doesn't happen until Scott is at the Carlton group.
Right. Because then you have the old man
So,
as well.
the old man. So, yeah, I'm intrigued to see when he shows up. Obviously not in this book, but in the next couple books.
Yep.
There's a lot we have to get to with this series. I'm excited.
Would you say, though, both getting the troll and everything we've talked about with these mystery boxes and the characters we've come to love, this is like a rejuvenation for the series, or a regenerator of, I was kind of losing interest with Blowback. The Path of the Assassin, book number 2, we talked about how hard that is, the second book. I haven't yet had the buy-in to the Scot Harvath series that, gosh, think about it, that transfer gives you, that separation of power gives you, and we just go one after the other, and Mitch Rapp just steamrolls you. You're in it. I haven't felt that way yet, but this book, it's getting my attention. Do you feel that this one is about to usher in a new wave of the series? Like, I feel like the first 5 books are what they are. We've covered them. We've talked about them. I feel like here a page is being turned, or a wave is coming of this book is ushering in the next phase of who Brad Thor is as an author and what's in store.
I think so, but also Brad, unlike Vince, is willing to just try crazy ass things in his novels from year to year. So there's definitely, we're going to get to a stretch. And again, it's once Scott is working for the Carlton group where the books are just banging.
That's where they take off. They take off.
They take off. Like, I want to say like Blacklist, the Full Black, and Spy Master, and Takedown, and
Backlash.
Not Takedown. Backlash.
Oh, yeah.
So
we're flying high by then.
We're flying high by then. But yeah, I think I'm really liking this one. Again, there's some things that I can critique with it. Way better than Blowback. It's definitely better than Path of the Assassin. I don't know if it's better than State of the Union. It's definitely not better than Lions.
State of the Union was good. We did enjoy it. The Russia plot, the Germany scenes.
It's about even with Rising Tiger for me. Sort of like just in the middle.
Okay.
I liked Rising Tiger.
Same.
But it's also hard to compare. Like it's really stark, like reading these early ones and then reading, like Rising Tiger.
You might think it's 2 different people, to be honest with you. Like, you read all these, the first 5 books, and you could tell they're a similar author. Like Path of the Assassin, State of the Union, Blowback, Takedown. It's like very, very kind of similar in tone, or even in pacing and construction, how the plot's constructed. However, Rising Tiger, Near Dark, all the recent ones, you wouldn't even think, it would be the same author as someone who wrote something like this book. So definitely going to see those changes. One other thing you said made me think of, not to always be comparing it to Mitch Rapp, and the Mitch Rapp series, and Kyle said this, reads like one long story arc. It's almost one long biography of Mitch and Irene.
Right.
That's definitely not true, I feel, of the Scot Harvath series. I'm not getting a picture of his life and the timeline of his life through these books. I'm just getting different separate adventure stories, which are all really, really cool and really, really fun. And you're right. The series doesn't take off until it has the through lines, and the Troll is part of that. The Carlton group's a big part of that. Scott settling down with some ladies is a part of that. I wonder if the Meg Cassidy, or whatever her name is, in Lines of Lucerne.
Laura. Oh yeah.
And then Meg Cassidy. Right, we need to get to Lara.
Yeah.
And now we need to get to Sonia. And I feel like the books have more of that connective tissue once those platforms are established. So very different so far in how I have to approach this series to what we've done on the Mitch Rapp Pod. So just me processing here. Just I'll get out of the funk. And I'm not going to draw conclusions on this book until part 2 next week, because these mystery boxes that are laid for us, the traps that have been set, I think I'm falling into them hook, line, and sinker. And I think the end of this book with the reveals is just going to blow me out of the water. So I'm going to reserve judgment on this book. See until I finish it next week. And you guys will get to hear, the raw cut, hot takes of our scores, our analysis, and how this book stacks up. I'm not going to rank it yet until we get to the very end next week.
All right, sounds good. All right, we need to thank our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always,
let Scott be Scott.
Let Scott be Scott. There you go. And as always, let Scott be Scott.